We're in a book study over the course of the series, and we said we're going to be in 1st and 2nd Samuel, which is really Samuel, and it's the story of the prophet Samuel and then King Saul and King David. If you're new to this passage, maybe new to our church, and you've missed a couple weeks, just to catch up. Week 1, we talked about Hannah, who prays because she doesn't have a kid of her own, and she asks God for a son. God answers her prayer. And then in answering that prayer, she dedicates her son to the Lord. Samuel, who is the last of the judges, and he is a great prophet. And he's going to be the one that anoints King Saul, and he also anoints King David. And so last week we talked about this moment where the people of Israel have decided, hey, instead of letting God lead us and God be our king, they have asked for an earthly king. Hey, we just want to be like all the other nations. If we could just be like everybody else, that would be great. You'll give us a king. And so this week we want to look at a passage in chapter 14. Now, chapter 13 and chapter 15, Saul has already been king, and he, out of a place of disobedience, disqualifies himself. God fires him in chapter 15. God anoints David in chapter 16, and the rest of 1 Samuel is really about the unraveling of Saul's reign and David rising to the throne. But in chapter 14, there's this cool story that I think we can learn a lot from. And it's not even so much about Saul as it is his son, Jonathan. And so in this, just a little bit of context, background. So Saul has been at war with the Philistine army. He'll continue to be at war the entire time he's king. And he's so good at his job. He has grown his army from like 3,000 to like 600. And now the Bible tells us going into chapter 14 that they also don't even have weaponry. So the Philistines have taken out the blacksmiths of the Israelites, and now there's only 2 swords in all of Israel. King Saul has one, and his son Jonathan has one. Key ingredient in military and just kind of like warfare is weaponry. You know what I mean? And so they don't have it, and kind of backs up against the wall, impossible situation. They know that God's called them to take the promised land. They know that they're supposed to move forward, and yet they're just kind of sitting, waiting. And then Jonathan, on faith in chapter 14, just decides he's going to do something. And so that's where we're going to pick up in the text. In verse 1, it says this. It says, one day, everybody say one day. One day, one day, one day. I like, we're just going to hang out right there. I think things can change. Big things happen over the course of one day. Like one day you're not married and the next day you are married. One day you don't have a kid and the next minute you do have a kid. 1 minute, like big things happen over the course of one day. One day you live here and the next day you move and you live in a different place. And so, and I don't know what your day looks like today. I'm trying to gauge based on your face how amazing of a day you're having. What it's looking like. Some of you are having a better day than others. And so like you could have woken up this morning. First of all, it's 11:30 service, so I mean you got a little more sleep. Come on, than the 8 a.m. But you could have woken up this morning and man, you just beat your alarm clock by 22 seconds. You don't want to beat it by like 5 minutes. That's annoying. But like just right before it goes off is great. Maybe you already had coffee. You didn't realize somebody made you coffee, or you made coffee for yourself. And your quiet time with Jesus was amazing. You did a secret handshake today, and your driveway. Here's how I know if I'm having a good day on Sunday. If I hit every green light on 127, whoo, in Jesus' name. If I'm in step with the Spirit. If I make it through that last green light, I'm like, it's going to be a great day. But maybe you're here and you're having a hard day, and maybe you're here and you're in a pretty broken situation, and you're up against some health news or financial struggle or broken relationships or the loss of a loved one or whatever the things are that put us in a space that just feel like an impossible situation. I've been in a place before where it just felt like there's just no way out of this. And here's the good news. In one day, things can turn around. Like in one day, God can do an incredible work in your life. And that's how he starts this passage. He goes on in verse 1. One day, Jonathan, son of Saul, said to his young armor bearer, come, let's go over to the Philistine outpost on the other side. He feels compelled to go and do this thing. He feels compelled to take initiative, Jonathan does, to move in a certain direction. He's feeling purpose for this moment. My question is how do you know if you're in the will of God? How do you know if your life is exemplifying, oh, this is God's call in my life. I feel like I'm moving forward in the things that God wants me to do. And because, again, the decisions that we make mark us. So the job that we take and the people that we're in relationship with, the person that we marry, the place that we move to. And at some point, we just decide to kind of go all in a certain area of life. And these moments really define us, major decisions. And the thought is we stress out sometimes, like, what if I get it wrong? Like, what if I'm not in the will of God? And what if I get it wrong? What if I make the wrong decision? And like Jonathan, sometimes you just have to, like, in order to even know, you just have to, like, do something. You have to, like, move in a certain direction. And so Jonathan tells his armor bearer, come on, we're going to the Philistine side. And I love this. And so, again, if you're in this season where you're wrestling with the question, what is God's will for my life? I can tell you for sure that his will for your life is not that you would do nothing, but that you would, like, do something. And so that's what Jonathan decides to do. He goes on in verse 1. It says that he did not tell his father. So he's going to do this really bold thing. He's going to go over to the Philistine side. The Bible tells us that at this point, the Philistine army is about 36,000 people. Hello. It's 600 Israelites. They ain't even got but 2 swords. And then he decides, hey, I'm going to take my buddy, my armor bearer, and we're just going to roll up in Philistine territory. Not a great plan. And so, but he just does it. And this audacious thing, this faith-filled thing, this bold initiative, he does it. And the Bible tells us he does it without telling his dad. By the way, dad's the only other one with a sword. You know what I mean? I would probably, but he just decides it's not worth it. I'm not telling my dad. And a great question for all of us is, am I the type of person that when my loved one comes to me with something exciting that God's put on their heart, am I the type of person to squash that or excuse it away? Hey, there's no way God could use you in that way. That's ridiculous. You're not going to be an astronaut. That's crazy. You're not going to be the president, whatever. You know what I mean? Like begin to just like talk people down. Jonathan doesn't go to his dad. He'd rather share this moment with an armor bearer, just a young armor bearer, than his dad. And yet he feels compelled by God to go in a certain direction. Look at verse 2. Saul was staying on the outskirts of Gibeah under a pomegranate tree in Migron. And with him were about 600 men. And so here's King Saul camped out. Your Bible may say cave. So there's a pomegranate tree. It's a symbol of wealth and luxury at the time. You got King Saul playing his part. He's sipping a pomegranate drink with a little umbrella in the cave, hanging out, getting comfortable. 600 men, and Jonathan decides we got to do something. Look at verse 3. Among the people who were with King Saul was Ahijah, who was wearing an ephod. He was the son of Ichabod's brother Ahitub, son of Phinehas, the son of Eli, the Lord's priest in Shiloh. No one was aware that Jonathan had left. So it tells you all these kind of like this core group of people, kind of his court, the king's court, really important people. And then the Bible tells us that he's wearing the ephod. Why does it say he's wearing the ephod? So I love it because he's like, hey, they're dressed in their religious attire. They look good on the outside. That, you know, that they're looking the part, but they're not moving forward on the thing that God's called them to do. What does God call them to do? Take the territory. What are they doing? Hanging out in a cave. But they look good. You know what I mean? Like they look the part, but they're not moving forward. And so I feel like sometimes for us as the church, we do this. We get comfortable and we put on what we need to on the exterior and we pretend that we're faithful, that we're doing the things that we're supposed to be doing. And people ask us how we're doing. We're like, we're good. We're great. We're fine, which is how you know somebody's really struggling. When they say fine, you're like, oh, because we lie about it. Like we just pretend that everything's okay. Meanwhile, sometimes life is hard. And instead of being vulnerable with one another or with God, we just like to pretend. And so don't just dress the part and go through the motions, unwilling to do what God has called you to do. Make yourself available to what God has for us. Look at verse 4 and 5. It says on each side, so Jonathan is going with his armor bearer, his brother, and they're going to the enemy lines. And as they go, here's what happens. On each side of the pass that Jonathan intended to cross to reach the Philistine outpost was a cliff. One was called Bozez and the other Seneh. One cliff stood to the north toward Michmash, the other to the south toward Geba. Anytime you don't know how to pronounce something in the Bible, if you say it real quick and with conviction, nobody knows the difference. You know what I'm saying? Because the people around you probably don't know neither. So just, anyway. But what I do know based on study is Bozez means thorny and Senna means slippery. So he's walking along and there's these cliffs, thorny on one side, slippery on the other. And he's not even made his way to the enemy yet. And yet he feels compelled to go in this direction. And just because you're following the will of God doesn't mean that everything's going to be safe in your life. The Bible, basically, right? So like the cross of Christ, like Jesus is right in the will of the Father as he gives his life over. All the apostles, all the disciples are martyred for their faith. They give their lives over for the sake of the gospel, with the exception of John, he's like almost boiled alive, and then he's sent into exile. And then the Apostle Paul, and really majority of the first century church giving their lives over for the sake of the gospel. Not safe, and yet right in the will of the Father. So you and I don't live in a time where we feel, we definitely don't, we don't have that level of scrutiny. We don't have that level of oppression. We don't have that level of, definitely people aren't. And yet, at the same time, I feel like we play it safe over and over again, like in our faith. And so the question is, when was the last time you did something for God that just made you uncomfortable? That it felt risky? That it felt like this is not safe, this is not secure, like what if this doesn't work, And so to me, I would say that's how you know whether or not you're in the will of God, if you're in spaces like that. And it may not be safe to be in the will of God, but it's the most fulfilling place for you to be. Look at verse 6. He says, so while he was walking through a thorny and slippery pass, Jonathan says to his young armor bearer, come, let's go over to the outpost of those uncircumcised men. That's a way of saying those Hebrews, those people who are not in covenant with the Lord. Perhaps the Lord will act on our behalf. Nothing can hinder the Lord from saving, whether by many or by few. But I love this language in this part of the passage that says, perhaps the Lord will act on our behalf. Your Bible may say, maybe God will show up. I love the level of certainty that he has. So he feels compelled to go in a certain direction, but the level of certainty is not that great, right? Maybe God will show up. Like if I'm the armor bearer, I need more than that. You know what I mean? Like I need a little bit more than that. And so have you ever felt compelled to do something or called to do a thing and your certainty level was like, perhaps? I was thinking about over the course of just our life, and the thing that probably is easiest for me to grab hold of is like when we started the church, Brooke and I, we felt compelled to do a thing, but we were like 54% sure that this was what God wanted us to do with our lives. And we're like, we think, maybe the Lord will bless it and like do a thing. And so you just kind of have to move on faith and go in that direction. And that's exactly what we see in this passage is that maybe God will show up. And that's not the rousing assurance given by the head coach or a general or a CEO. In the movies, whenever people give that big speech and everybody does like the impossible task, they win the game they're not supposed to win, or, they win the war they're not supposed to win, or something crazy happens. But it's always because somebody gives like a really cool speech, like this is going to happen. It feels prophetic. This is not what's taking place right now with Jonathan. Jonathan looks at his armor bearer and is like, perhaps this is going to work out. So here's the way it plays out. The Bible doesn't even tell us the armor bearer's name. Jonathan wakes his brother up in the middle of the night. He's like, hey, because again, we don't know his name. My man, Buddy Gus, get up. And so he gets him up and he's like, what? He's like, hey, we're going to go to the Philistine side. Armor bearer's like, who's we? And he's like, me and you. He's like, just me and you? Yeah, that's the plan, me and you. Do we got weapons? I got a sword. I need you to carry it until we get there, and then I get my sword back. You're going to have to get a stick or something like that, right? And so he's like, that's okay. He's like, did you hear from God or like what? He's like, maybe. Perhaps. Let's go, okay? It's like, I wouldn't get up like if I was the armor bearer, but this is exactly what he does in this passage. And I love the faith of Jonathan because the faith of Jonathan isn't based on his weaponry. It's not based on the numbers. It's not based on his performance. The faith of Jonathan is based on God. And so he's like, no, you don't understand. God has told us to take this land. God has told us to move forward. I understand this is silly, but also God. You know what I mean? And so look at this. This is Hebrews 11:6. It says this, and without faith, it's impossible to please God, because anyone who comes to him must believe that he exists and that he rewards those who earnestly seek him. You can't do anything in finding or following Jesus outside of faith. God saves you by grace, but through faith. And then every act of sanctification is you trusting God with more of your life. Every act of you becoming more like Jesus, grabbing hold of what God has for you, grabbing hold of the promise, grabbing hold of like the abundant life that he paid for, is faith, is what Hebrews tells us. You go to the Bible and you look at any cool story, any figure, you're like, oh, I love them. It's so cool. And my hero, faith. Like he always and only works through faith. 2 Corinthians 5:7, for we live by faith and not by sight. And so how do we do it? How do we know if we're compelled by God? How do we know if we're in his will, if we're like right in alignment with what he has for our life? I'm going to give you my theology of the will of God real quick, okay? Here it is. Pray, guess, go. Real profound. Write that down. Pray, guess, go. And the guess I'll unpack. It's actually not that. It's actually educated guess. But pray, guess, go. What if I don't do it right? You probably won't. Right? Just keep praying, keep guessing, keep going. What if I go in the wrong direction? I thoroughly believe that if you have prayed to God, hey, should I pursue this relationship? Should I pursue this vocation? Should I move? Should I take this opportunity? I thoroughly believe that if you pray and you move forward on faith, that God will speak to you and give you direction. He'll redirect you if you need to be. So this is Acts 16, the New Testament church. This is what happens with Paul. Paul tells us in Acts 16, he was like, we were going in a certain direction. He's like, man, we were kept by the Holy Spirit from preaching the word of God in the province of Asia in Acts 16. He's like, we were stiff-armed. Like we were going in a certain direction thinking, yeah, it would be good. Of course God would want this. And he's like, nope, not right now. And so there's all these examples in Scripture of that taking place. And I believe if you submit it to God, then he'll take care of it. I also believe if you're so hard-headed, if you've already prayed and you're just so hard-headed and locked in, you're going to go a certain direction. There is biblical precedent that the Lord will just swallow you up by a fish and then vomit you where he wants you to be. Okay, so he's God. He can do what he wants to do. But most Christians, we just pray and we talk about it, and then we pray some more, and we talk about it some more. Like, we've got friends, we'll be talking to people in the church, or we'll ask them, hey, what do you feel compelled to do? What do you feel compelled? And we're trying to help get them there. We're like, we see this on you. We see this is, God's moving. And they're like, yeah, I'm just going to pray on that. Cool. 2 weeks later, how's it going? Still praying. Awesome. 6 months later, still praying. It's like, at some point, just try it. But just try something. Just put something on and see what happens. And so we should be very careful also to use language like God told me. When people say God told me, I always take that with like, especially when they're like, hey, God told me this word for the church, which I get a lot. There's like, hey, God told me. And so maybe God did. But I like Jonathan's language here because Jonathan has enough faith in God to run into the battle, but enough humility to be like, perhaps the Lord will like, honor this. And so look at verse 6. It says, perhaps the Lord will act on our behalf. Nothing can hinder the Lord from saving, whether by many or by few. And so Jonathan's saying, I think this is the right move, and if it's God's will, then the numbers don't matter. And it doesn't matter that there's 2 of us and 36,000 of them. If God is with us, who could be against us? That kind of mentality. And so Jonathan's saying, I know this is the promised land. I know what God's told us that we need to run after. God said that it was ours. And if it doesn't work out, then it doesn't work out. But if it does work out, how amazing would that be? How crazy would it be if we ran after the thing that God told us, and then he actually meets us in a place that looks like only a miracle, like only God could bring us out of this situation. As followers of Jesus in your life, you will either live a life of risk or regret. And so you're either risking things for the glory of God. So the idea is don't waste your moments, don't waste your time, don't waste your talents, don't waste your treasure, don't waste your opportunity, the things that God's given you in order to advance his kingdom and leverage all that he wants to hand you to bring heaven to earth and make an eternal impact in the lives of others. The idea is you either do that or you regret not having done that as a follower of Jesus. The idea is, man, did I miss my moment? Did I risk it? Like when God spoke to me and told me to do a thing, did I do the thing that God told me to do? Or did I just, in my own selfishness, in my own comfort, in my own whatever, I was just like, I'm good. In my lack of faith, I was like, I don't know, that's kind of scary. Like, I don't really want to do that. And then later in life, I'm like, man, I missed it. And so we don't want to be there. And so I don't know what's worse is for you to spend a lifetime chasing a dream that you never realized, or to define the dream, like grab hold of the thing that you've been dreaming, realize it, and then and just understand that it's just not that good of a dream to begin with. I get like interviews of people who like made a major life goal, and then they accomplished their major life goal by the time they're 32, and they're like, what now? You know what I mean? It's pretty empty. And it's not that success is a bad thing. It's just not a God thing. And so fulfillment is only found in his calling, his direction, his leading. And this is, again, for the follower of Jesus, this is true for every human, though. God will call you to move in a certain direction. And if you move in that direction, it's always more fulfilling. And so what would you do for God if you knew you couldn't fail? What are the things that he's kind of like got you excited about, passionate about, stirred up in you? What's the burden placed in you? What are the things that you would do for God if you knew you couldn't fail at those things? And many people would say, I don't have a clue. Like, I know that I'm supposed to be faithful to my family. I know that I'm supposed to be a good wife, good husband. I know I'm supposed to be a good dad. I know I'm supposed to be a good mom, good friend, good family member, good, member of the community. I'm supposed to steward my moment. Outside of that, I don't really have like a particular call or a particular conviction or burden around a specific thing. And so I'm going to make it easy for all of us. It could be forgiving somebody that you haven't forgiven in like 12 years. It could be reconciliation. It could be being honest about where you are and confessing what you struggle with, and then asking God to help you in that place, and then inviting the right people in that conversation so you find healing, so you find freedom. And so maybe it's taking a proactive approach to your relationships instead of just hoping that they get better. But you're doing something on faith that God will restore what needs to be restored. When Jonathan says, hey, let's go over there. When he looks at his armor bearer and he says, hey, come on, let's go over there. What is your over there? And just answer that. Give yourself permission to imagine stepping out in faith towards what you feel like God is calling you to. And here's what the buddy says in response. This is what the armor bearer says in response, which is indicative of why he picked this guy to go with him. Look what he says. Verse 7, do all that you have in mind. His armor bearer said, go ahead, I am with you, heart and soul. And I love that. Such an encouraging dude, you know what I mean? Not smart, but he's so encouraging. And he's just, and we'll read passages like this, though, and sometimes we'll take it out of context. And be careful quoting Bible verses like this to justify your actions. Like, hey, go after it, heart and soul, whatever you feel, whatever's on your heart, whatever, and basically don't follow your heart is what I'm trying to say pastorally. Follow Jesus. This is Jeremiah 17:9. The heart is deceitful above all things and beyond cure. Who can understand it? So it's not that you shouldn't have a passion for things. It's that your filter by which you're passionate about things should be Christ. And so I'm going to get real practical. Like, what is the will of God? Hey, what's discovering purpose look like? What does that look like for me? This is the guess part. So pray, guess, go. This is the guess part. Here it is. Number one, is it for my personal glory or God's glory? The thing that I'm running towards, is it about me or is it about God's glory? Is it about me or is it about others? And number two, will this make me more like Jesus or less like Jesus? Have I prayed? Have I asked? Have I listened? Do I really desire to hear from God in his direction? And if I hear from him, Acts 16, am I willing to go in a different direction? Or am I like so locked in, I got to have this? Number 4, what does the Bible command, permit, or prohibit? Number 5, what do other followers of Jesus say about it? Specifically mature followers of Jesus, because there's a spectrum. You won't go for the mature follower of Jesus. Number 6, does this draw others close to Jesus? There's an evangelistic bend to every assignment, every call, every purpose that God has for every single person in this room. and it doesn't matter what it is, because people are his passion. And because Jesus, when he's leaving and he ascends to the Father and he gives a great commission, it is centered on people being brought into reconciliation, into right relationship with the Father. That's the goal. The goal is help people get to God. People who are far from God, help them to get to God. And it doesn't really matter what you do as you do that, just that you do that is kind of the idea. So does it draw others close to Jesus? Because again, you could put purpose on anything. Any kind of job, any place you find yourself, you can leverage that. And then the seventh is this. This will help you with discovering, is this God's will for my life? Am I passionate about it? I know some people who do things out of a place of obligation. They do things because of compulsion. They do things because of a religious duty, rather than, I am passionate about this thing. And we have too many people doing things that they hate, and we can all tell. We can see you hate it. Like, stop doing it, okay? And it's just, and it might be that you're not graced for it, not good at it, not affirmed in it, or it might just be that you hate it. But either way, what am I passionate about? Don't ask yourself, what does the world need from me? Like you're gonna fix everybody's problems. Ask yourself, what makes me come alive? What gets me up? Like, what gets me excited? Because what the world needs is more people who have come alive. And so these are things like, man, just what is my next step in fulfilling my purpose and the call that God has on my life? And just really practical, tangible examples of ways, because some of you are in here, you're like, I want to do something for the Lord, but I don't really know what to do. I don't really know what to do. Okay, here's a vehicle that we have as a church. There's two examples that I have. We got Serve Day coming up. Serve Day is just an opportunity to be the hands and feet of Jesus out in our community. We start Saturday morning, we end early Saturday afternoon. There's hundreds of people, all different types of projects, and we're feeding people, and it's beautification, and we're praying for people, and we're like, it's an incredible opportunity for you to be like, I'll try that out. Never done it before? Do it. If you've already done it, do it. Like, just the opportunity just to get tens of thousands of dollars that we as a church family, you guys, sow into our community, and it's a really cool example. This is happening in July, second week of July. You can go online and register for that. Another example is we have an army of people here at Soma who operate in their gifts week in and week out, over 500 who serve on the dream team, who make everything happen, who literally do all that we do as a church. And these are just examples of ways, man, what are some of the things that I can do? Like vehicles that already exist, I don't have to make a new one. For me to leverage the gifts that God's given me, put purpose on these. But the idea is, whether it's a Sunday or a Monday or a Thursday or job or whatever, discovering your purpose doesn't mean that you live your dream. It means that you live his dream for you. So it means that God has purposed me. He's called me. And even before I was born, he already had in mind what he desired to do in and through me. And me discovering purpose just means I just got to lay down my agenda, die to self enough that I'm willing to trust that his plans for me are better than my plans for me. And then when I discover purpose, it's like, oh, that's way better than what I had in mind. And so many times for followers of Jesus, we just stay stuck, though. God has a great call in our life, and we're simply not moving forward. And if you want, if the 7 things that I gave you don't work, if everything that I've said to you up to this point doesn't work, and you're like, I'm still have no idea what I'm supposed to do. If you're a follower of Jesus, I'll give you 2 verses. This is for every follower of Jesus, Matthew 28, 19 and 20. Therefore, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything that I've commanded you. And surely I'm with you always to the very end of the age. That's our assignment. Notice that he doesn't tell us how to do it. He just says, go do it. He doesn't care where you do it. He doesn't care, he just cares that you leverage whatever spot that you're in. And again, Acts 1:8, Jesus says, you will receive power when the Holy Spirit comes on you, and you will be my witnesses in Jerusalem and all Judea, Samaria, to the ends of the earth. When you receive power, so he said, hey, I'm going to give you the gift of my presence. My spirit is going to come and reside in you. And the only way for this to work is for you to stay in sync, lock in step with the Spirit. Pray. The reason why pray comes first is like, God, what do you want me to do? Where do you want me to go? How do you, and then whatever direction you feel like he's giving you, even if you're like perhaps, maybe this is what he wants me to do. go in that direction on faith. And then as you put your faith to it, as you step out in faith, God begins to empower you to do incredible things locally, nationally, internationally. That's what he says in the text. And so this is how you have the best educated guess at calling and purpose for God's will. And so, but just like having a vision and like an idea is different from like moving forward with a plan. And Jonathan has a plan in this passage. It is a horrible plan, but it is a plan. Okay, so this is what he says in verse 8. This is, as far as like military tactics, not a great tactic. Armor bearer looks at him. We're going to the Philistine lines. I'm with you. I'm getting up out of bed. What's the next play? What are we going to do when we get there? He says, come on. We're going to cross over toward them and let them see us. Like, he's never watched Rambo. You know what I mean? Like, there's 2 against 36,000, and it's like, hey, silent assassin, should we go guerrilla warfare? Should we, like, what's the tactic? We're just going to pop up out a hole and just stand there. That's what we're going to do. Also, you don't have a weapon. You know what I mean? And so that's his plan. Look at verse 9. If they say to us, and this is where he gets a little prophetic, God's speaking to him, he begins to say what he sees. If they say to us, wait there until we come to you, we will stay where we are and not go up to them. But if they say, come up to us, we'll climb up, because that will be our sign that the Lord has given them into our hands. So it's like God is speaking to him about what's about to take place. Verse 11, so both of them showed themselves to the Philistine outpost. Look, said the Philistines, they're blown away. The Hebrews are crawling up out of the holes that they were hiding in. And the men of the outpost shouted to Jonathan and his armor bearer, come up to us and we'll teach you a lesson. And so Jonathan said to his armor bearer, climb up after me. The Lord has given them into the hand of Israel. Jonathan climbed up, using his hands and feet with his armor bearer right behind him, and the Philistines fell before Jonathan, and his armor bearer followed and killed behind him. Bold faith, I love the audacity that Jonathan has in this moment. I love the courage of conviction that he has in this moment. And bold faith comes when we experience that God is who he says he is. And we think back to God's faithfulness. You know, Jonathan's taking inventory of God's faithfulness. Like, not only in his life, but just in the life of the covenant people. Just in the life of the family of God. He's like, oh yeah, God was faithful, God was faithful, God was faithful. He said he'd do a thing and he did a thing. He's doing the math and he's just moving out. It's one thing to think about it. It's a whole other thing to like step up out the hole with like 36,000 of your enemy, you know. And so look at verse 14. In that first attack, Jonathan and his armor bearer killed some 20 men in an area of about a half an acre. And then panic struck the whole army, those in the camp in the field and those in the outposts and the raiding parties, and the ground shook. Philistines are starting to just take each other out. They're freaking out. And then listen to this line. It was a panic sent by God. So Jonathan, in his faithfulness, he steps out. He feels compelled to go in a certain direction. This feels a little insane. It's definitely high risk, high reward. He steps up out of the hole, and then God meets Jonathan's faith with God's faithfulness, which is exactly where he meets us. God will meet your faith with his faithfulness. The miracle is like right there. It's right there. It's the difference between stepping out of that hole or not stepping out of that hole. And all it required is Jonathan to just trust God enough. And you and I would have never picked Jonathan. Like, we would have never looked at the situation with him and his armor bearer and we were like, I got money on those guys. You know what I mean? Like, we would have never done that. And yet, this is what the Bible tells us about the people of God and about his church. In the book of Acts, for example, people looked on the followers of Jesus, the early disciples, the apostles, and they said, these are ordinary jokers. This is what it says in Acts 4:13. They realized that they were unschooled, uneducated, ordinary men. These are people that they're like, you're going to start a movement, get over yourself, right? And then it says this, they were astonished and they took note that these men had been with Jesus. What is it that set them apart? Was it pedigree? Was it good looks? Was it politics? Was it who their daddy was? Was it the car that they drive? No, these are people, these are unassuming people. Never would have picked them for your team. And yet God in his sovereignty decides to use ordinary, unassuming, uneducated, whatever people. The people who are least qualified are the people that he's like, you. And so if you feel like you're in that camp, that's what he does with the local church. Now, fast forward to Acts 17, and here's what it says about those same guys in Acts 17. People looked on them as they showed up, and it said, these men who have turned the world upside down. That didn't take long. You used to mock us back in the day. A little while later, whoa, these people have like done the thing. Like God has worked an incredible work in and through them. My question for all of us is like, why can't that be us? That I would love for my life to reflect the goodness of God, God's faithfulness, and God's miraculous work in such a way that it catches people off guard a little bit. They're like, that guy? Like, wouldn't you love to live a life that way? Like you're following Jesus in such a way, such a bold way, such a conviction and a courage and audacity that people look on your life and they're like, seriously? Like I would love for us as a community of faith, for people, I would love for God's glory to come through and just like his renown to be known by that church in Hickory that, what? And so I would love, that would be such a great testimony to his faithfulness. And I was talking to this guy who's in Rotary Club with me, Heart Pivot, Rotary Club, shout out to Rotary Club. And so, but older gentleman, and he's been in Rotary Club for decades, and he comes to me one day and he's like, hey, I just want to sit down and have lunch with you sometime and just talk to you about what you feel like God is doing in your church. He's like, I've been here a while, and I just want to know. And I was like, I can tell you. He was like, okay. I was like, we pray, and then we worship, and somebody opens up God's word, and we talk about God's word, but here's the secret sauce, I think, and it's not just a me thing, it's a we thing. We're moving in the direction that we feel like God's called us, just on faith. We're just willing to have the audacity that God desires to do what he said he would do in his word. Like we don't want to just be, I don't have zero desires to just have a church and be like, we got a church, the lights are on. We're like, that life's too short. We want a move of God. We want God to move in such a powerful way that only he can get glory for the thing. And the reality is I don't always know. Again, when we started the church, it was like, I'm 54% sure this is what we're supposed to be doing right now. I had this moment when we first started that I had to decide, like I didn't see myself as having the gift of evangelism. And I knew other people who had that gift, and I was like, that ain't my gift. I ain't got that gift. And I had to make a decision early on when we started as a church. Am I going to present the gospel? Am I going to share Christ? And am I going to give people an opportunity to say yes to Jesus, surrender their lives to Jesus, regardless of my feelings? And when we first started as a church, I was like, I'd made a decision, but I still had to have that moment. Like I was at the enemy lines. I still had to stand up out that hole. You know what I'm saying? And so like we were there day one, and we invited everybody that we could, like, hey, here's our core team. Invite everybody that, needs a church home, people who are far from God, whatever. And I got to the end of the message and I was like, do I just like tell them to fill out a card or what is that? What am I doing in this moment? And so I just, on faith, I was just like, hey, if you want to give your life to Jesus, if you want to surrender your life to him, let me know. 17 people responded. And I was like, okay. Like, and ever since then, God's shown up in a faithful way in the life of our church. Much like people are getting baptized today because of what God has done. God has met people at their faith with his faithfulness. He's done the same thing with salvations, done the same thing with marriages being restored, done the same thing with a miraculous healing, done the same thing with provision, done the same thing with like fill in the blank. What we're doing, but like people come to me and they're like, hey, the Moretz thing, when we do the Moretz thing, is that going to work? I don't know. I prayed about it. I think like maybe God will show up, like perhaps the Lord is with us. And then they're like, hey, this new building thing, it's going to cost a lot of money. Is this going to work? I don't know. So far, so good. Like wherever God has led us, like he's met us in that space. And so I just don't want to operate out of a place of fear. I don't want to operate out of a place of, man, that's too crazy. What are we talking about? 2 verses 36,000. Here's even bigger. Jesus is alive. Like, so if the tomb is empty, like if he's out the grave, what are we talking about? Are we talking about money? That's stupid. Are we talking about like, oh, he can't work in my relationship. God can't work in my relationship. It's too far gone. He was dead and now he's alive. Like, it's okay. And so the idea is I don't want to operate out of a place of fear, but I want to operate with, I'm more fearful of what I miss out on in the moments that I don't grab hold of what God has for us as a community of faith, or even me personally, than I am a fear of looking dumb. And it used to be more of a fear of looking dumb, but increasingly, just to encourage you that it grows. The more that you trust him, the more that you hand him, the more that you see his faithfulness in your life. I was reading just a few years ago this book from Jim Cymbala on Fresh Wind, Fresh Fire, guy who pastors Brooklyn Tabernacle up in New York. And early on in the life of their church, they just kind of built everything off of these little prayer parties. And there weren't very many people in the room. But he was praying crazy, bold, audacious prayers, insane prayers. And here's what he says on page 23, and it just shook me. He says, I despaired at the thought that my life might slip by without seeing God show himself mightily on our behalf. Don't you want that? Like, don't you want God to move in such a way in your life that people look at your life and they're like, whoa, God is crazy. That's wild. Look how good God is. I know them. They're not that great. Look how good, look how amazing God is. And so this is what we desire. Look at verse 16 in this verse, in this passage. We'll keep reading on. It says, Saul's lookouts at Gibeah and Benjamin saw the army melting away in all directions. Then Saul said to the men who were with him, muster the forces and see who's left us. And when they did it, it was Jonathan and his armor bearer who were not there. They're just now figuring out they're not there. Saul said to Ahijah, bring the ark of God. And all that time it was with the Israelites. So while Saul was talking to the priest, the tumult in the Philistine camp increased more and more. Verses 19 and 20, so Saul said to the priest, withdraw your hand. Then Saul and all his men assembled and went to the battle. Isn't it great how when one person moves in faith, it inspires other people to move? Isn't that funny the way that God works? And isn't it interesting that it wasn't King Saul, the leader? It was somebody else. But it was just the faith of Jonathan was like, we got this. More importantly, God's got this. And so he just steps out, and then God begins to move, his faithfulness meeting them at their faith, and they're taking inventory, and now all of a sudden people are moving. Can I tell you, every single person who's getting baptized today is getting baptized because somebody else got baptized. Somebody else's life was transformed by the work of Jesus. And we took note, and we say, man, it's worth everything for me to go all in. But it just takes one. It just takes one. I was thinking, we're going into Serve Day. I didn't share this at any other service, but I got time. So we're going into Serve Day, and one of our partners this year is Convoy of Hope. Convoy of Hope is like an incredible charitable organization, Christian nonprofit, and feeding and serving and disaster relief and all the things. And Hal Donaldson, the guy who starts it, he tells a story about how they started. And it started because he had gone on this missions trip. He had gone overseas, and he was spending some time interviewing Mother Teresa, of all people. He was working, doing an interview for her. That was part of his job while he was there. And she asked him, she said, hey, what are you doing for the poor? And he was like, oh, snap. Mother Teresa done asked me what I'm doing for the poor. He's like, I thought it was a bad idea to lie to Mother Teresa, so I told her nothing. And she was like, everybody can do something. He said, it messed me up. He said, so I went home. I just started putting groceries in my car, just like a little bit of groceries in my car. And then it grew, and people were like, hey, you still doing the grocery thing? And they started buying groceries. Then I had to get a truck. And so like, hey, we need to get you a truck. And then somebody bought me a box truck. They were like, you doing that grocery thing? Bought me a box truck. And then they had to give me warehousing. And then turn around, they're like one of the top 50 charitable organizations in the United States. But it all started with one person who felt compelled to go in a direction. And can I tell you, the same thing is true for the local church. What God desires to build, what God desires to birth, the people who God desires for you to reach. When God says go and make disciples of all nations, he's not talking about like vocational ministry people. He's talking about you. Go and make disciples of a coworker, of an extended family member. And if you're not around people who if you're never around people who have different set of convictions than you, don't believe what you believe, that kind of thing, you need to get in a different space so you can at least begin to build some relationships with people, so you can serve people, share the gospel with people. That's the whole idea, but it starts with one. Look at this verse 21. Those Hebrews who had previously been with the Philistines had gone up with them to their camp. They went over to the Israelites who were with Saul and Jonathan. When all the Israelites who had hidden in the hill country in Ephraim heard that the Philistines were on the run, they joined the battle in hot pursuit. Them jerkers waited until the Philistines were on the run to join the battle. Anybody who's ever built anything, this is so great. You know when you're winning and things are successful, like you got a little win in the sales, you got some momentum, how many jerseys you sell when you're winning. You know what I'm talking about? Like I'm a Warriors fan. But I was a Warriors fan after they won that first championship. Come on, somebody. Not after, I wasn't so bandwagon that it was like after 4. But like after that first one, I was like, okay, Steph, I see you, Steve Kerr, great. But I only became a fan after they won. And so they're joining the battle. But it's a little late in the game. It's okay. It's great. We're glad you're here. Thanks for joining the battle. Look at verse 23. So on that day, the Lord saved Israel, and the battle moved beyond Beth Aven. I love that it says the Lord saved Israel. It does not say Jonathan saved Israel, or Jonathan and my man that nobody knows his name, our armor bearer. It doesn't say that. It just says the Lord saved Israel. And that's what we desire as a church family, that we would be compelled to move in the direction that God has a call in our life. We just got to pray about it. We have to guess as best we can. Again, educated, biblical, there's some filters, but honestly, we're not always sure. And just move in faith. Do something, and God will meet us in his faithfulness. And so where in your life have you stepped out in faith? And if God doesn't show up, it's a problem that he doesn't show up. I feel like for us as a church in this season, I feel more responsibility than ever. I also feel more confident in God's call in our house and God's direction for us as a church family. I also feel more dependent on God than ever before. There's no way and so there's no way to manage it. And yet that's exactly where he wants us. And you have to think that for your own faith. What is it in my life that if God didn't show up in this relationship in this way, if God didn't show up, maybe a sacrificial generosity, maybe I'm serving in a particular way, maybe I'm having a hard conversation, maybe I'm walking across the room and just putting it out there, I'm awkward, I'm just witnessing for who Christ is to me. What is that thing that I'm stepping out in faith? And if God doesn't show up, it's a problem. And we need to step out. And we need to just pray that God would move on our behalf, and we need to just move forward on faith and then ask him to meet us. Let me pray for us.